right, guys, welcome. Today's episode is all about IRA, the new Inflation Reduction Act. We are brought to you by Smart Charge America. I'm Joseph Barletta, and this is the Charge Life Podcast, where we discuss EVs and all things EV charging. Glad you could pull over today and park with us. Let's get plugged in. Before we begin, today's episode is brought to you by Smart Charge America. Since 2007, Smart Charge America has installed tens of thousands of EV charging stations nationwide, and they can do the same for you today. Let their team of installation specialists guide you to the best charging solution for your new electric car. After all, if you can't charge, you can't drive. Visit Smart Charge America today to get started. All right, so today I have Mr. David Laderberg, Vice President of Smart Charge America, here to join us today. We're going to talk about the new Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which we all like to refer to it here in the office. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. One of the first things to realize about this particular bill, there are 6 components of the actual tax credit for the EV charging, like the EV sector. And so 2 of the main components that qualify the OEM to have the full $7,500 tax credit is the battery minerals requirement. That's like the elements of the battery. It's cobalt, magnesium, nickel, all of that, lithium ion, of course. And then there's the battery components. And so of that battery component, you have the fact that it has to be assembled in North America. So let's go ahead and dive into each one of the 6 sections, and we'll talk about how we see, as charging station experts, how we see this affecting the market. You got to understand, David and I have been, I've been in the industry since 2007. David's been in the industry since, I believe, maybe even 2012, 2011. So he's got about 10 years under his belt too. So a lot of knowledge here we're going to throw at you guys. Hopefully we see a little bit more value. So the first one that's going to qualify the tax credit for the OEM is the battery minerals requirement. Now, so you have to understand, before, prior to the IRA, I think every single electric vehicle manufacturer right now qualifies for the $7,500 tax credit as is, but they cannot produce, or they cannot sell more than 200,000 EVs in a single calendar year or rolling year, right? If they sell more than $200,000 or 200,000 EVs in that year, whether plug-in hybrid or regular, then they would the current tax credit will slowly start to dissipate, and after a year, it goes down to zero. So Tesla hit that back, I don't know, 14, 15 maybe, and then Chevy, GM hit that, I would say around 2019, maybe 2020. So those are the 2 manufacturers, and Toyota, those are the 2 big manufacturers that basically don't qualify for it anymore. But all the other manufacturers do currently, right now. Mm-hmm. And so this Inflation Reduction Act, we know it's going to go into effect January 1st, 2023. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the industry between now and then with regards to buyer activity, buyer awareness of what's going on, and how that's kind of going to influence the markets. So that's one of the things that we're closely looking at. But it's kind of a brief history of the existing tax credit. There is a tax credit right now that you can qualify for. Doesn't matter. You just can't be one of those 3 OEMs. If you buy an electric car from any other OEM, you'll get a $7,500 tax credit. It's a non-refundable tax credit, and depending on your tax liability, you may be able to absorb the whole thing. So all good things. Let's talk about the first factor here is battery minerals. All right, so David, battery minerals. So I have here that one of 2 critical parts of the $7,500 tax credit, and so if this component is not met, then the OEM only qualifies for $3,750, right? $3,750 for via tax credit. So part of the battery minerals, again, that's the elements that compose of lithium-ion batteries. It's the lithium, magnesium, cobalt, whatever, phosphate, iron, whatever you're choosing to make your batteries out of. It's the elements themselves. They have to come from North America or any of the free trade countries, and the actual minimum amount that has to come from those free trade countries or North America is 40% as of 2023. It's 40%. You can't get around that figure. And so that figure actually will increase 10% over the next 5 years. And so what we know is by 2027, that manufacturer has to show that 80% of its battery minerals have to come from North America or those free trade countries. And so That being said, battery minerals. How close? Like, what do you think that's going to do for the market? That's a very tall.
It's going to have a lot of effects. I think it'll, first of all, it'll be difficult for any manufacturer to, meet those requirements. I think they're going to struggle with it. Some of these manufacturers have control over the, raw materials going into the batteries. Some of them do not.
That's right.
They don't control it, and they'll be relying on another manufacturer, which is not uncommon. But ultimately, they'll be beholden to them. They to set up your own supply chain for batteries, and within this time frame, it's going to be incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of time to be able to source these materials, and you can imagine if this has been coming till today. You said the president just signed it. You better imagine that the demand for minerals, battery minerals, coming into the U.S. and sourced from the U.S. and North America and the other free trade countries is. I bet the demand has increased. That means the price has probably increased too.
You mentioned supply chain. What do you know about the current supply chain? How it all works? How does it, like right now? What does the normal supply chain look like when it comes to battery minerals for these batteries? Do you know much about that?
I mean, I wouldn't. Far from being an expert on it, but from what I've seen, a lot of it comes from South America, Africa. There's also parts of Asia where a lot of these have been mined for many years and used for many purposes other than just batteries. And so it's competing for resources. Number one, not a lot of these are just battery focused at all. Right. They're using a lot of different products. Right. But you can imagine now that the number one demand is that. So I think for us to be able to source this in these locations, like the law is suggesting, it's going to take time to do that. But certainly it has a good incentive to make countries. And if, they have to increase prices to be able to accomplish that, I effectively see it as the government says that, hey, it's going to be more expensive for you to do this and set this up. So we're going to help offset that because in the long term, it's going to be better for, the U.S. and its, partners in North America.
It's a good point. What manufacturers do you know of that are close to meeting this right now?
I don't know of any.
I did see an article. It seemed like Tesla was about 90% there.
Okay.
But no manufacturer right now currently is hitting this mark.
It's taken Tesla 10 plus years to get to where they are now.
That's crazy.
And everyone else is...
Tesla's like 90% there. Everyone else is like 20 to 30% there.
If they're
That's
lucky.
The crazy point.
Yeah.
So... I get it. I know why they're putting this stuff in there. We're trying to balance the leverage on us not being so dependent on a foreign country for the fueling source that is going to allow us to move and pivot from, kind of a fossil fuel, transportation system or energy system to a battery, more sustainable.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's in the interest of national security.
That's right.
To have this all come from our partners in North America. So I get it.
Definitely makes sense. All right, so battery minerals. 40% of battery minerals inside of the batteries must come from North America or any of the free trade agreement countries. So that right now, what we know is that Tesla is about 90% of meeting that mark. Better believe that Tesla's got a lot of stuff up their sleeve to make sure that come January 1st, 2023, that their battery minerals, at least 40%, are being sourced kind of in alignment with this.
I think this will influence battery chemistry. You can imagine if it makes more sense, because if you can source the materials from these countries,
lithium iron phosphate,
then you're going to change your battery chemistry to conform to what's available, because it makes sense based on this credit. So if it strategically makes sense, then you will change the chemistry. So it could have that impact as well.
Awesome. All right, so second component, which is two of two critical parts of the $7,500 tax credit. Again, if this component is not met, the OEM only qualifies for half, which is $3,750. So that requirement, battery components. So keep in mind, one is battery minerals and the elements that actually make the battery, and then two is the entire battery pack. Like the battery components, everything that makes up that battery component. Yeah, so the battery components must be manufactured or assembled in North America. So that's U.S., Canada, and Mexico only. It must be 50% by 2023. So January 1st, 2023, you have to have 50% of your battery components manufactured here in the U.S. or Canada or Mexico. So it must be they must be manufactured and assembled, and that's very important. Most of the battery components are generally made out of China, Korea, Japan, maybe Germany. we don't really do too much of battery components. We probably do, but we probably ship it out to other countries. And this is a good way of us, kind of maintaining and keeping that
I mean,
close.
This makes sense anyways. I think it goes hand in hand because where you get the minerals, if it's from North America, then it makes sense to make the battery. You don't want to ship it across, the ocean to another continent.
It's not sustainable.
To make it. And so I think it goes hand in hand. And it's just, if anything, it's making it like, two pieces of the puzzle that would make sense to do anyways from manufacturing and profitability standpoint. And it just reinforces it. That's all.
So they want to get to 100% of this in the next 6 years. So by 2029, they hope to be at 100%. One of the things, and I don't know if this is an error, but one of the sources that I got, you could basically see January 23, 50% requirement, and then 24, 60%, but then 25, 60%. Like I guess they're just going to skip a year. On the enforcement?
Still wondering.
And then 70, 80, 90, 100?
Obviously, they probably got some feedback from the industry and manufacturers
on
and
how
sourcing on what it's going to take. Yeah, it's going to take a ramp. There's a lot of other factories that are under construction or planned for construction in North America that it's going to take time, and I think that's reflective of that. So they have a lot of work to do.
Okay. Awesome. So that's battery components. So battery minerals, elements, so forth and so on. Battery components, making the battery components, so forth and so on. So the third one is EV assembly. So the entire EV must be manufactured or assembled in North America. So that is ironclad. They are only allowing you to assemble or produce the EV in Canada, U.S., or Mexico. Must be North America. That is huge.
Yeah.
I can only think of one manufacturer right now that meets that. That's Tesla.
Yeah.
Unless you can think,
I know
maybe Volkswagen?
VW has a plant that I know that they make.
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
BMW has a plant, where they make, plug-in hybrids.
Where is that one at?
It's in South Carolina.
South Carolina, okay. I thought it was one of the Carolinas.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So EV assembly, that is, that's a pretty big part. So let's go back to that. And, all right, so the fourth one is going to be the actual tax credit itself. So we know that the tax credit has no cap. So originally, remember we talked about where, if you sold 200,000, electric vehicles in that year, then the next year you would slowly start to just dissipate and it would dilute the actual tax credit from there, ending up at zero. I guess, was it over 2 quarters or was it over 4 quarters that it would end up zero?
I believe it's either 4 to 6 quarters
that it would go down zero.
Because I remember it ramped down with Tesla. It took time, but once it did, it was out.
Right.
That was it.
Right. Okay, so no cap on OEM sales, which is awesome. So GM, Toyota, and Tesla are now eligible as a result. Plug-in hybrids get the same amount as EV as long as the battery is 7 kilowatts.
I don't agree with this at all. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, hybrids, they're just not nearly as efficient. They're heavier. They're just a lot more work. There's more moving parts. I don't see it working.
But the interesting thing is the industry has started to shift away from plug-in hybrids. Even manufacturers, they're not producing plug-in hybrids anymore. You look at the most famous one, which is the Chevy Volt. They're not producing that anymore. They stopped producing it in 2019.
Toyota is going to be thrilled for this, is what that tells me. I mean, the plug-in hybrid king, right? They must be in love with it. And you got to think, if you can put a smaller battery in a car, then the percentage of components, meaning the battery components, which have to be North America sourced, the minerals that have to be North American sourced.
Right.
If you have a small number, it makes more sense to put it, smaller batteries in a lot of cars. And so, if anything, it does encourage plug-in hybrids, which is not the direction everyone wants to go.
But does it encourage the gateway drug to be introduced those who otherwise wouldn't get into electric vehicles? We all know that game that the Chevy Volt, did, right? I mean, the Chevy Volt had a little game where the first version, had a 40-mile range. The second version had 50-mile range. And there was I think on the app, there was always a game where, you would compete against, other drivers around your neighborhood or around your territory where you can see how many miles they've driven on all electric compared to gas. And it was kind of like a little game. And so if you actually start realizing once you get butts and seats in these plug-in hybrids that, man, I can do 98% of my driving on all electric, well, then that's still pretty good. I mean, I get it. It's not for hardcore EV enthusiasts. We hate this, right? Do you know the battery size of the Chevy Volt, like 2019 or 2013 Chevy Volt?
I mean,
was it around
what does
7?
It matter?
Was it around?
Honestly, that's what it comes down to is how many miles can you get out of it. It was like 50 miles or so, and everyone that got one, a Volt, and everyone that I talked to that had a Volt barely ever put gas in it.
That's right.
It just the gas would go. Actually, one of the bigger problems is the gas
would go bad.
It would go bad,
and it would ruin the engine components that are working inside the car. So
and now because you're dragging around this hundreds and hundreds of pounds of engine, old legacy
that you're never really using. So 90% of the time, 98% of the time, you're not even using.
Like I got a 2014 BMW i3 with a range extender.
That's right. That's right. You did have that.
I did use it a couple of times where I needed the range extender. There were some situations, especially when it got cold, or maybe it was just a longer driving day.
That was an air-cooled battery engine.
Yeah. So that's where that came into play. But man, I was carrying around 500-600 pounds of engine a majority of the life of that car, all of it, of course. And that's where think about how less efficient the car was because of that. I probably didn't need the range extender in those instances if I wasn't lugging it around. Right?
Oh, the irony.
Yeah.
The irony is great. Oh, man, I didn't even think about that. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the OEMs do when it comes to the plug-in hybrid effect. We've seen these manufacturers just slowly start to... Now, a lot of them, they introduce the plug-in hybrid to get kind of accustomed to the technology and kind of ramp it up, maybe generation 1, 2, 3. And then once they feel like they have a real good grip on where it is, then they introduce their all-electric model, right? And then as that all-electric model ramps up and they have, generation 1, 2, 3 of that all-electric model, they slowly start to discontinue and move away from the plug-in hybrids because the sales aren't there. So it'll be interesting to see how they recoil back and how they change their strategy on this.
Well, I think part of this could be the reality that battery components and minerals are going to be, higher demand than ever now, right? Which is good.
Yeah.
But the ability for that demand to be satisfied is lower than ever right now, and it will continue to be low because of that ramp. And so it's almost, I guess, I figure almost out of necessity because you're going to have a smaller battery because you don't have a choice.
So you think they're throwing this in there to kind of...
I think maybe they're looking at the bigger picture and the numbers over the next 5 to 10 years of the ability for battery mineral,
to get there.
Miners to be able to get to that point and the manufacturing to get to that point.
Man, that's a good point. That is a really good point. So also used cars, many times, so the used cars are eligible for $4,000.
So many questions about this. Like, how does that work? How many times can it apply to the
exactly.
same vehicle?
Dude, I can sell you, and then you sell it back to me, and then
I know. Is it only dealerships, or how is this going to work?
Yeah. That's that one we gotta kind of keep a close eye on because right now we know that the used EV market has really lifted. I mean, it's
big time.
It's definitely they're retaining their value, if not more.
That's because you can't get a new one.
That's right. It's 6 months out, or I mean, look at Tesla. They just what did they release that they're not taking orders for the Model 3, right? You mentioned something about that
Model
one day.
3, you can no longer get a reservation. You can't get in line until 2023. We're in August.
Awesome.
It's August.
That is awesome.
Yes.
So that is the fourth component is the tax credit. So lots of stuff to go over there. $7,500. And for a pure EV, $7,500 also for a plug-in hybrid EV, but that battery has to be 7 kilowatts or more. I think OEMs, if they look at that, I think if you have a plug-in hybrid that has an 80-mile range, and it's a plug-in hybrid, I think you're going to dominate sales. If you can maybe have like a CUV or an SUV that has 80-mile range, it's a plug-in hybrid, I think that's going to be now we're talking gateway drugs, okay? This is the gateway EV. That's what I'm hoping that some manufacturer out there says, you know what, these guys are right. If we make maybe a 12 kilowatt hour battery that goes 80-mile range, and then the regular engine kicks in for another 350, whatever, total mileage 420, like you get what I'm going, 420, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and I think if you do that, you will steal so much market share from just the regular plug-in hybrids that go 15 miles or 25 miles. You throw an 80-mile range on a plug-in hybrid, you're really going to start getting people to know that, like, man, 99% of what I'm doing is able to be covered in 80 miles. I can go get that plug-in, that pure electric vehicle at 300 miles or 260 miles because now I feel comfortable. Mine's only got 80, and 99% of the time I'm running on all battery. Like, if somebody out there can do that, make it a form factor of an SUV, CUV, I don't care. Don't make it a car. But if you do make it a car, that's fine too. But that having the SUV form factor or the CUV form factor and having that component, I think will literally it'll put somebody on the map.
As long as they can get the batteries and make it large enough, absolutely. I hope they do. Because, yes, I agree.
Gateway drug, man. All right, so number 5, we're going to go into dealership point of sale eligibility. So this is comes to EV types. So customer to submit, I'm imagining the customer is going to be able to submit IRS tax returns to dealership for point of sale qualification based on income limits, because we know that the income limits, if we look at the income limits, we know that you have to have, I think one person is 150,000 annual salary, so that's annual income, and then if you're a combined household, married household, then it's $300,000 combined to qualify for the tax credit. So they're trying to do it at a point of sale, which is at the dealership, on the dealership level, and then the dealership will be eligible for that tax credit, which is awesome. That's going to make the processing of it a lot easier. It's going to be assumption of it.
Well, I mean, the dealership has to foot the brunt of all that processing and verification.
Yeah, it's great.
Are they the people that make that decision or not? Are they going to do it right? What if they do it wrong? What if they mess up?
I know.
Right? What if someone gives bad information or incomplete information or withholds information?
Right.
Now what? Who's going to pay for that? How's that going to work?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they do that, how they go about verifying. I mean, they do have a financial. Everyone that buys a car from a dealership, you got to go through the finance guy. He tries to sell you all kinds of stuff, so forth. Even if you're buying it cash, like they try to sell you warranty and all that stuff. So perhaps in that process, they will require you, if you want to qualify for that tax credit and be eligible. Here are the 7 documents that we need from you.
And the government will have to confirm that people aren't doing that at the point of sale, and then also filing it with their taxes
at the end of the year.
So they have to obviously.
So maybe they get some sort of certificate from the dealership saying, "Hey, you passed all of our testing."
When I got it previously, I had to put my VIN number into the my taxes when I got the tax credit back in the day.
So they had a section for
it. But do they track it? I don't know.
Do you remember the number of that form that you had to fill out to get the $7,500 tax credred for the car?
Man, tax forms. Why would I remember that?
8651
that I try to remember.
There's only so much space we could have. Let's just throw the IRS form numbers out of there. All right, so that is the point of sale eligibility, and then of course the income limits. We have individual is 150, combined is 300, and I thought head of household is like 200 or 250 or something like that. I think the head of household is 200. But I'm only focusing on like single person, married person, right? Yes, there is another category for head of household. Figure it out. I don't know, but I believe it's somewhere around.
Talk to your tax professional.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the income requirements there. Remember, $150,000 for individual and $300,000 for combined. So it'll be interesting to see if they want point of sale eligibility, how they go about proving that and making you eligible, and then how they shift that liability. IRS-wise, shifts it on the dealership, and then also maybe puts a little bit of liability on the person when they submit their taxes at the end of the year. All right, so the last but not least are the price limits. So we know that for cars and sedans, you have a $55,000 price limit that the OEM has to set MSRP value on that. If it's more than $55,000, it will not qualify for.
It's gonna be a lot of cars priced at $54,999 MSRP for C.
Yes,
it's a prediction right there.
Yes,
let's see.
And then your price limit for SUVs and trucks is $80,000.
$79,999 on sale today, folks.
That's it.
Come get it.
You know why I like this? Do you remember the horror stories we heard on the F-150 when it came out? Like dealerships were marking it up $100,000, $40,000, $10,000, $20,000, like more above. They can't do. Well, technically they can still do that, but
then
if the buyer wants to qualify for the rebate, then. But if they mark it up for more than $7,500, then and they can get away with it, then they don't really care about the rebate.
Well, devil's in the details. Does this include, dealership added accessories? Does it include? Is it just destination fee on top of that, or what is this MSRP?
Man, it's a good question. I thought it was everything. You buy like your final price has to be below $80,000, because if you just go off the MSRP, then great. I'll buy the standard F-150 that's $40,000. But then the accessories, the platinum model, is like $96,000 or something, close to $100,000 tax title license. So,
right.
The devil is in the details. I do agree with you on that. So, you're looking at again, the most important thing is for cars and sedans, $55,000 price limit on that. Anything below qualifies. Anything above does not. And for trucks and SUVs, you're looking at a price tag of $80,000. Now, and here's the all-in question. Where do CUVs come into play on this? The largest growing sector of compact utility vehicles out there. So is a compact utility vehicle an SUV kind of category, or is it more of a car category? Look at the Model Y compared to the Model 3. Look,
I don't know if it's the NHTSA or who determines that.
Who determines that?
It is determined, though.
Yeah.
Because I know there are certain laws, like, give you an example, like you notice SUVs, quote unquote SUVs, what they'll have is tint on the passenger rear and rear windows. They're allowed to do that because they qualify as an SUV. They can put 20%. It's basically allows 20% light through. So
on
you
the
see,
rear windows?
Yeah, SUVs, they always have tinted windows in the back.
Interesting.
Not the driver and front passenger window, but just the back windows. So I know that's
cars come with that too.
You'll never see a car with a tint like that from the factory. Only SUVs
really
get that designation.
I had no idea. Awesome. Learn something new every day.
So
that, folks?
I think that's already been figured out on like if it qualifies as an SUV or not, because they either have that or don't have that as an option. So
for sure.
I think that's probably figured out by now.
For sure. Awesome. So that is the IRA in a nutshell. When it comes to just electric vehicle, kind of like place. Now, this Inflation Reduction Act is massive. From estimates, there are about $374 billion coming in for all things climate change related, energy related, sustainable transportation, that sort of thing. So this is mainly dealing with just the EV and the transportation sector when it comes to EVs. And so, again, just to summarize, we have new tax credit, $7,500 for EV and plug-in hybrids, anything above 7 kilowatt-hour battery pack. You have $4,000 tax credit for used EVs. That's awesome. You do have two very qualifying, important components, which is the 40% battery minerals requirement from the OEM, as well as the 50% battery components requirement from the OEM. All of the EV must be assembled and or manufactured in North America, so that's Canada, U.S., and Mexico. You do have price or income limit for the buyer. The buyer cannot exceed $150,000 for individual income limits or $300,000 for combined income limit. They are trying to make it point of sale eligible, but the actual price for the electric cars themselves, they do have their price limits: $55,000 for cars and sedans, and $80,000 for price limits SUV and trucks. So, that being said, that's the formality of it. What do you think this is going to do to the electric vehicle industry? Go.
We're going to see more manufacturing plants in North America, probably mostly Mexico is what I anticipate. A lot of Mexican factories. GM's already announced some.
Okay.
I hope more are in the U.S., but I don't expect manufacturers to do that, at least initially. So I expect also the buying patterns to be probably delayed until 2023, which, you got some people that want to sell cars, used EVs now. Will it make sense? Will they wait to sell their used EV until 2023? So I think that'll be interesting because, again, you got that rebate available and it's more valuable to the dealership that resells it, or if you sell it, private party, if that qualifies or not, we kind of wait and see. Because, me, for instance, I have a long range Model 3. I'll sell it, if I can get enough money out of it, but I'll probably use it to upgrade to a Model 3 Performance maybe, right? And if it's worthwhile, will it be worthwhile now? Because I know if I get the Model 3 Performance, it won't qualify for the tax credit at all as a new vehicle because it costs too much, right? So if that final price
it's over
50,
it's over 55.
It's over 55,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So but the used car will get more value. It will make more sense for me to do that in 2022 versus 2023. Right? That's something I'm thinking about.
You mentioned accessories. Does software, FSD, does that include in the can you get away with, let's say, having a Model Y for $79,999, right? All bells and whistles awesome. And then after the fact, say, hey, I want to purchase FSD, and you just do it after the fact instead of with the price.
As long as you're able to foot that bill and not finance it, $14,000 after the fact on your credit card, not everyone could do that. They don't even have enough credit.
But if it makes you eligible for $7,500 tax credit, then FSD virtually gets cut in half.
So yeah, that's huge leverage for Tesla, but you still got to qualify. You got to be under the 55, or you need the SUV. So Cybertruck, you're going to need a Model Y or a Model X. that qualifies for the 80, and you still have to have it under that configuration. So yeah, I bet there will be
but
some.
But the fact that you can purchase FSD or software engagements after the fact that you purchase a car could alter maybe some sales strategies there when buying your new EV.
Yeah, more after the fact subscriptions being added.
Yes.
Oh, do you want subscription for heated seats like BMW has already started?
That's right.
The things they add after the fact, and I bet there will be more of
Really?
that.
Heated seats?
Yeah, actually, look it up.
That's
it's
awesome.
insane.
Oh. So one of the things that I really was passionate about is I see I'm from the South. And so I see a lot of refineries happening in the states of Louisiana, Texas, Houston, Port Arthur. As you're traveling down that I-10, you see a lot of those refineries, and that I'm traveling past them with an electric car, and I'm just seeing like, man, this is in 30 years. I don't know if these guys are going to be here. They may
I hope
not be here. And so if they start transitioning to maybe rethinking how we're fueling our transportation sector, maybe instead of refining oil, they start refining batteries. And I love this act right here because it really starts to get people to think that. I was thinking this like 5 years ago. I was like, look, the best thing Houston can do is stop manufacturing or refining oil and start refining batteries. You need to have a battery hub here. It's an insane amount of work to be able to manufacture battery components. I can tell you this right now. And if you look at the trade, everything is being, all the raw minerals are being mined out of these countries, and they're all going to China. And then China is making the batteries, components, all of that stuff, and shipping that out to the rest of the OEMs across the world. America's trying to, Biden, this administration, they're trying to pull that back into, like you said, it's a matter of national security. They're trying to pull it back in the U.S. I love them for that. Hopefully it's going to start awakening some of these major cities. I just saw an article that Alabama was trying to get, trying to become like a really good hub spot for all things battery manufacturing. And I was like, there it is. That's what I want to see.
It's the beginning.
I want to see that in Louisiana. I want to see that in Texas. Kind of the southern parts of Texas. Even Amarillo. I mean, where they're pumping and oil jacks and all that stuff. Get rid of that stuff. Be a manufacturing powerhouse. No pun intended for batteries. Oh, yeah. All things batteries.
Absolutely.
So the real question is does North America and or the free trade countries have enough of the elements like in land to be able to mine, to be able to meet
I think so.
the current demand?
I think absolutely. You just have to set up a mine. Some of those take 5 to 10 years to set up.
Yeah, I have no idea how that works.
I certainly wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any means, but what I've heard.
But here's another thing: you have recycling batteries, right? So if you recycle the battery, and you have the black mass, and you recycle that, and then you either pyro or metallurgy means you now have the elements of your battery pack that have been recreated, right? You can recycle 97% of these lithium-ion batteries. So let's say you have that. Does that, if you put that recycled element back into the supply chain, does that count towards the 40 if that recycling is done here in North America and in the U.S.? I say yes, it should.
It says sourced, but yeah, you're right. There's a burden that's being placed on the supply chain to have full clarity and transparency, and that's challenging to be able to do that. And are there ways to get around it? You'd be totally blind if you said that there's no way to get around it. And of course, people that get around this, and this is true for so many different raw material sources that people like, whether palm oil or just countless other products where we want those coming from good, sustainable sources. But how do you really ensure that
forensics accounting or however you go about doing it? I love the fact that it's exposing manufacturers. This law is exposing manufacturers to be able to produce that information.
Yeah.
So all things considered, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 45 months. Leading up to when this, I think when this goes live, it's going to go bonkers. It's going to be awesome. We better prepare. We better do some preparing and some scaling up ourselves. So we're already kind of taking strategic initiatives to figure out what that's going to look like. But at the same time, we're in the middle of a recession, and if people are retracting some of those sales in anticipation for this, it's going to be difficult. And so it's like we need a ramp, but we're also in the middle of a recession. And if people are going to start not buying electric cars, we're going to have to start figuring some stuff out, getting real nimble But that's good for us, right? And so that keeps us on our toes. So, anything else you want to share with the audience today about the tax credit?
No, I'm excited to see what types of effects this will have in the marketplace, and I think it also bring a lot of attention to for buyers of electric vehicles and also non-electric vehicles to see that hey, these are valuable, they're good, right. And it's every time someone gets an electric car and has that experience, it just spreads like a virus in the best way possible.
Butts and
they
seats, man.
Talk to everyone and want everyone to ride in their car.
That's it.
That's how it's been happening, and it will continue that way. And I think this will help.
Awesome. Well, folks, thank you for our listeners and our audience for the time. We're all better for it. David Laderberg, appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, let us know if we earned it. Go ahead and click the thumbs up icon below, or like, share, comment, subscribe if you think we earned it. Thanks again for charging with us today. Keep in mind, you can always find us at smartchargeamerica.com. And remember, folks, if you can't charge, you can't drive. We'll see you next time. Cheers.